Hello everyone, Happy New Year and welcome back to the channel. My name is Kitty and I'm an academic junior doctor working in the UK. Today we'll be finishing the CV Building for Medical Students series, focusing on how to demonstrate your commitment and interest to specialty. This is arguably the most important part of your CV and portfolio as a medical student. When you come to applying for a postgraduate job, the most important thing you have to do is to show that you've built up an interest towards your specialty of choice and you've taken steps to pursue this interest. Imagine if you were the interviewing consultant in this situation. It really wouldn't matter if the candidate in front of you has had 10 international prizes if they didn't seem interested in the specialty in the first place. Especially as medical students, you're in such an early stage of your career that nobody would expect you to fulfill all the criteria of your CV at this stage, like publications, presentations, etc. But consultants will probably expect you to have shown a reasonable amount of clinical interest at your stage, and some evidence that you've taken steps to find out what you like or don't like about particular specialties. In this video, we'll go through a couple of practical things that you can do to demonstrate your interest on paper, which really boils down to really anything and everything that is related to your specialty of choice. But typically, we can break this down into courses, conferences, clinical experiences, themed SSCs and electives, and national exams and memberships. For each specialty, there is almost always certainly some mandatory courses that you have to attend before you can get into specialty recruitment. For example, the Basic Surgical Skills course or the BSS in surgical training. Although for the most part you can't attend any of these courses until you have graduated medical school, you can still demonstrate your interest through attending courses meant for medical students, which are often plenty and really affordable as well. Looking up BMJ courses, Doctors Academy, and the websites of various Royal Colleges or trainee societies are really good places to start. Student-oriented courses are often really good starting points for building up skills in practical procedures, as well as learning a bit more in depth about a topic that you're interested in. Having said that though, courses are still expensive, so don't attend them for the sake of your CV, but attend them if you think you'll be able to get some useful skills and learn some useful things out of them. So we talked about courses, what about conferences that you can attend? Personally, just on an attendance basis, I feel that courses in general offer more educational value for the time and money spent on it compared to conferences. During medical school, the only conferences that I attended was because either there was a good course that was run at the same time, or if I was presenting something. And whilst I've always enjoyed my experiences at conferences in terms of the networking and listening to, field-leading experts talk about the latest piece of research, I think there's probably less teaching educational value involved compared to a dedicated course. Student conferences in particular are really more of an opportunity for you to present your work rather than an actual networking with experts in the field. By all means, do attend conferences if there is a massive discount for students, or if you're going there to present something, or they have courses embedded within the conference which are really good educational value. For example, the ACIT annual conference is always a good choice, but I wouldn't try to go to too many conferences just on the basis of attending one. Clinical experiences is a really important part of your CV because it shows that you've taken time out of your normal medical school placement to have a look in depth at what work is actually like in your specialty of choice, both in terms of the clinical context, so what sort of clinical work will you do on a daily basis, like clinics or theatres or ward work, what sort of patients you're dealing with, but also on a personal level in terms of the work-life balance. Do you think that is something that will suit you in the future? I personally would really recommend trying to get some experience in your specialty of choice outside of medical school, so for example, in a few weeks during the summer. And in my opinion, there are 3 key reasons on why you should do this. I generally find that the time allocated to each hospital specialty is really limited whilst you're at medical school, perhaps with the exception of GP. And like I said, because of this limitation, it's really hard for you to appreciate the kind of intricacies of working in that specialty, with things like what's the actual clinical work involved and what the work-life balance is like as a consultant. Because really, when you're looking at whether you want to do the job, you shouldn't look at what the F1 job is like. You should look at what the consultant job is like, because that is what you'll be doing for the majority of your career, from your 30s to your 60s to when you retire. You'll be doing a consultant's job. And I always find that if you only get to spend a week or two with the specialty, nobody really knows you. You're the unfamiliar face on the ward. And as a result, you don't really get to do much, and you don't get to observe much, and you don't get to talk to a lot of people. Whereas if you've taken 4 weeks out of your summer to do a official or otherwise placement with a team of your choosing, then you actually get to have conversations with people on that team. They're more likely to get more familiar with you, and as a result, they let you do a bit more on the ward. The other key aspect to doing a self-organized placement in the summer is that hopefully you can ask the supervising consultant or whoever is nice enough to write you a letter to say that you've taken this time out of your own summer to do this. And this looks really good on your CV in that you've taken initiative and you've pursued an interest that you have to see what it's like. Alternatively, you can also do some reflections as part of your placement to count as an experience that you've spent there. And lastly, another reason you should do clinical experiences in your own time outside of medical school is that you will get complete freedom of what you want to do. You know, in medical school year, you have to get a certain number of sign-offs, a certain number of clerkings, and that's very restrictive on what you can do on that specialty. Even after you become an F1, even if you get to do a job in your specialty of choice, you're so bound by the ward monkey jobs and the mandatory sign-offs you have then that you won't really have the time to, you know, go to clinics, go to theatres, chat with the consultants and see what their day-to-day life is actually like. So yeah, I would really recommend going to a specialty and seeing what it's like in your own time to build up that rapport with registrars and consultants, and it's also an opportunity to identify some mentors. For those of you who are particularly interested in surgery as well, you should try and make your way to theatre as often as possible. In the surgical postgraduate selection, the more cases you have, the better your CV appears and the more points you usually score with your interviewers. So if you start whilst you're a medical student, you'll have built a much better portfolio. As a medical student, for all cases that you've observed or scrubbed in or even assisted, you should keep track of all of these in something called the surgical e-logbook. This is completely free and online, and you log down each case that you've done and exactly what you participated in. Then when it comes to the selection interview, you have really good evidence logged on the day of the operation is done that you've participated in these cases. This is what you've seen, this is what you've done, like suturing or whatever it might be. And for those of you who might not be interested in surgery, there are still lots of procedures that are usually not involved in a medical school sign-off that you can get involved in that would be really useful if you went on to become a medical registrar. For example, inserting central lines for those of you who are interested in anaesthetics and ITU, doing ultrasound-guided cannulas for the same reason, doing chest drains or thoracocentesis for those of you who want to go down the medical registrar pathway, and things like joint aspirations or lumbar punctures. If you have the opportunity to do these procedures, try and get whoever is supervising you to provide some form of written signature or some kind of electronic letter to say that they've watched you do this. So then you can put that in your portfolio as an evidence of what you've done on the wards. Themed SSCs or SSMs or whatever you want to call them, and themed electives are really important as part of your CV. There are lots of postgraduate training specialties that specifically say that you will score a point for having done an elective in a certain theme or an SSC in a certain theme, and this is something that you can't do after you've graduated medical school, so keep this in mind as early as possible and make sure you get that stuff on your CV. And it's really easy to do as well. Just spend your allocated time from your medical school or your elective on something that's related to your specialty. So in surgery, any surgical specialty or anaesthetics or whatever it might be, and try and get evidence in the form of a letter from your consultant supervisor, reflections that you've written whilst you were doing this, formal reports that you've done as part of this project, or recognition from your medical school. If you're particularly interested in academia and research, try and do a project with a clinical and academic component. As a bonus, these projects are also more likely to win an elective prize compared to something that is just clinical alone. When you graduate medical school as an F1 doctor, you also have opportunity to take 5 taster days, where you can choose to spend a day with another specialty, either in clinics or theatres or whatever activities that you agree upon with a consultant. Although this is a postgraduate activity, obviously, that you can't do as a medical student, I feel like it's really important to highlight at an early stage so that you're aware of it, because a lot of people end up doing F1 forgetting to book these taster days, and then when they go to their interview, it turns out, oh, you can get an extra point if you've done 3 or more taster days in surgery or whatever it is, and then you've lost out on a really easy point that you could have done by booking it earlier. In terms of national exams and national memberships, again, your CV will come across a lot more favourably if you've done these or you've had a membership as part of a national society in your field of interest. For surgery, you'll get extra points at the core surgical training criteria if you've already done the MRCS Part A, which is a written paper, or equally, if you want to go into anaesthetics, again, you'll get extra points for doing the MRCS. Now, again, these exams you can only do after you've graduated medical school, but the reason I want you to know about them now is that a lot of the content content is crossed over with what you learn in medical school, particularly after finals, you're in a very good place to start reading up and start studying for your next exam in your career. I'm personally hoping to sit the MRCS Part A in April, and when doing the past question banks, I come across a lot of questions that are knowledge that I've learned in medical school, particularly niche stuff like pediatric questions. And yes, you'll have to read a lot more and build on your existing knowledge, but it is a lot easier to do when you're closer to finals, when you already have all that knowledge in your brain and you can start reading and building on top of it, rather than leaving it to rest, forgetting all of it, and starting from scratch a few years down the line. And National Society memberships, well, they're pretty easy to get, and usually they're pretty cheap as well for students. So, for example, the Royal College of Surgeons, Edinburgh, it's a subscription fee of £15 a year, and it gives you access to all their courses and some of their teaching resources like Ackland's Anatomy, which is really useful. Or other trainee societies like ASIT, the Association of Surgeons in Training. Again, once you sign up for a yearly fee of like £45, you have access to almost all their courses for free, whereas if you were an outsider, you have to pay £50. And there's also other things like essay competitions that trainee societies will run and things like that. That's really easily accessible when you're a member, so I would say that's definitely useful to sign up for as a student. And finally, aside from everything that we've talked about specifically, like courses, conferences, themed electives, and national memberships and all of that, everything on your CV is a demonstration of your commitment. So if you've done an audit in your specialty or choice that you're interested in, that really shows commitment because you're interested in quality improvement in that area. Or, if you've done a leadership role in a medical school society related to a topic that you liked, again, that's commitment. And, when your consultant interviewer looks across your CV and they see that every section outside of just the commitment bit is related to the specialty of choice, that comes across so much better than someone's CV who's scattered across random different things that don't really relate to each other. I guess something to keep in mind is that for a lot of specialty selection, what happens is that if, for example, you've referenced an audit in the audit section of your CV or your portfolio, then often they don't count again for points in the commitment bit. So just be sure you read the small print when you apply. And for safety, if you've done 2 audits, then you can talk about 1 audit in the audit section to score the points for that bit, and then talk about 1 audit in your commitment part of your portfolio to score points for that as well. If you want to learn a bit about how to score top points for all the other areas of the medical CV, including research, publications, presentations, leadership, teamwork, and all that good stuff, you can check out this completed playlist of how to build your medical CV as a student on my channel, where I talk about each of those particular sections in more detail. And so this concludes the CV Building for Medical Students series. I really hope you've enjoyed these videos and have found them useful in terms of developing your career. As always, leave a like and leave any questions in the comment section below, and I'll try to answer them as soon as I can. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more educational and productive content coming soon. That's it for now, and see you next time. Bye!